Should you pursue an LLM or a JD in 2024? Does either of them provide any immigration benefit, or does either of them ease your job search in any way? In this episode, I'm going to be weighing the pros and cons of pursuing either a JD or an LLM in 2024, and if it even makes sense to do that, right? I'm going to be giving you my opinion. Why? Because I feel like a lot of you come to the US without knowing, without really considering your options. I recently got a question from someone asking me, what is a JD? And really, that's a very interesting and important question, right? And so in this episode, I'm going to be weighing the pros and cons for you so that you make an informed decision, and it's a decision that you're proud of, right? It's a decision that you can look back on and say, oh yeah, I knew that, and that's why I chose what I chose. And so let's jump right on it. So now, what is a JD? A JD means Juris Doctor. It is a 3-year intensive law school program here in the US, right? So let's think about this. It is an equivalent, in my opinion, to the LLB degree. So I'm sure in a lot of your common law countries, you must have undergone the 4-year program before you either went to a law school or did something of the equivalent. That is the equivalent here in the US, right? This is a 3-year program, and it is called a JD, or a Juris Doctor. No one really calls it the Juris Doctor, so we call it the JD program. It is the law school program here, right? The only difference between the JD and your LLB is that for the JD here, you must have undergone an undergraduate degree. So let me give you an example. You can't just jump off from high school and say, oh, I'm going to become a lawyer, and then jump into a law school here and become a JD. That doesn't work. It's different from a lot of common law countries, right? So in the US here, there's a requirement that you must have gone through an undergraduate degree before you decide to pursue a JD program and then go to law school, right? So that's something that you need to bear in mind. One more thing to note is that completing the JD degree does not give you the ability to practice law here. Like a lot of other countries in the US, you need to write the bar to practice law, right? But the JD program is the intensive law school program that is for 3 years that allows you, get exposure to all the different types of laws before you can then, write the bar exam to then become a lawyer. So now, let's talk about the pros of doing a JD in the US. The first thing I would say is that it gives you more time to get exposed to more laws in the US because it's a 3-year intensive program. And another thing is that you just get more time to integrate into the US system and culture. And I'm sure you're wondering, why is time important? I will tell you why as we go down this episode. But something you need to know is that a concern that I have heard from a recruiter and some few employers, and I don't necessarily agree with them, is that there is this perception that LLM students are just straight from their countries. They don't necessarily understand the culture. They've been here for 1 year, and how are they just supposed to jump off from 1 year into a big law firm or into a big corporation? They don't understand the culture. How would they interact with clients and stuff like that? And so there's this perception that if you're longer in the system, which is the JD, gives you that time of 3 years, you have sufficient time to integrate into the system and to really understand what is happening in the US, right? So that is one benefit that the JD gives you. It gives you more time. And LLM is a 1-year program, and afterwards you have 1 more year to figure your life out. If you've not figured that out at that point, you're required to pack your bags and leave. But with a JD, you have 3 years to integrate and to figure stuff out. So that is one pro of a JD. Hi, so have you subscribed to the channel? I hope you know that's very important for the work that we do. Subscribing, liking, commenting, it's how more folks who need this, see it and are able to make better and informed decisions. So please take a moment and subscribe. I'll wait for you. Have you subscribed? Okay, thank you. Another thing I want to remind you is that always remember that you can book some time with me, right? I have provided a link. There's a Calendly link in the description box where you can book some time with me, and we can talk about strategies and figure out how you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. If you want to talk about NIW applications, my experience, because obviously I'm not an attorney. I am an attorney. I am an attorney, but I cannot give you immigration advice because I am not an immigration attorney. But I can talk to you about my experience going through that. I can talk about the H-1B process because I went through that and I was denied. Anyway, just to let you know that you can book some time with me and we can talk about anything that pertains to you excelling as an LLM student. So please book some time with me, and please don't forget to subscribe and like and comment. Thank you so much. Now, the second advantage you get from being a JD in the US is that you get more time to intern. Remember that I mentioned that the JD is a 3-year program, and what does that give you? It gives you more time to work outside campus, because that is a restriction on a lot of international students, right? It gives you the opportunity to work outside campus. You have like 2 or 3 opportunities, it depends on how you count it, but you have 2 or 3 opportunities for 3 years during the summer to intern. And why is that important? Because a lot of times employers want to see that you've worked somewhere, that you have some sort of exposure to working in a US company before they, employ you in their big organizations and in their big law firms. This is very different from the LLM program. For the LLM program, you, to a large extent, do not have the opportunity to intern, right? To a large extent, your time is up the moment it begins. It feels like when you sleep and wake up, your time is up, but that's not really the case, because I'm going to talk about strategies on how to deal with that. But for an LLM, just to bear in mind, a lot of times you don't have an opportunity to intern during that first year, right? And guess what? The LLM program is only 1 year, right? And so if your LLM program is only 1 year, it means once you're graduating, you have only 1 year to really figure out immigration. That's very different from the JD students. They usually have more time to intern with a lot of organizations, and that allows them, that gives them a lot of job experience that they can put on their resume, and that helps to distinguish them in the market, right? And that is just, for me, it's very important. I say this because for me as an LLM student, I still did an internship, and I'll tell you what I did further down in the episode. You need to stay to the part where I talk about the LLMs for you to understand that. There are ways to navigate this, but it's important for me to just tell you that, a JD gives you more time to intern during your program before you jump off and you're looking for a permanent job. And that's very important for employers in the market today, in my opinion. As I said, feel free to verify, feel free to do all your research, but this is just my opinion and based on my experience. One other pro I think it's important to mention, and this is based on my experience, it is strictly my opinion. If you don't agree with it, that is fine. But it feels like a lot of schools in the US dedicate more resources to the JD student. And it's a no-brainer. Why? Because these JD students go through the 3-year law school program, right? As opposed to the LLM students that just come through 1 year, they're in and they're out, right? The JDs go through this 3-year intensive law school program, and so a lot of resources are dedicated to them. This doesn't mean that resources aren't dedicated to LLM students. I'm going to talk about that later on, but it's just something that is important to highlight. I would also say that during my time, I noticed that there was a lot more familiarity with the JDs, with the JD program than the LLM program. I went for a lot of functions where folks asked me, what's an LLM? And I'm sure if you watched my interview with Destiny, you must have noticed that that was part of his experience too. Like, a lot of folks would ask, what is an LLM? They don't even know what that is. Why? Because that is not the usual stream or pipeline for lawyers in the US, right? Typically, it is you go to the JD program, which is their law school, and then you go and write the bar exam, and then you're a lawyer, right? And so it looks like there's more familiarities, more resources. I can assure you that in my own experience, it felt like there were more resources for the JD students than the LLM students in terms of job search, career. But this is not all the schools, right? I think I interviewed someone on the channel who told me that was not his experience, because he had excellent career advice. Now, I wanted to bear something in mind. A JD is not a green card. A JD does not give you any immigration benefit whatsoever, right? It is like you came and you went to school and that's it. But what I would say is that it gives you opportunities. It gives you more interface with employers while you're in the program, while you're in the confines of a school. And that's very important, because when you get into the job market that can be brutal, those experiences that you have gathered over the past years, right? Those internships, those moot courts and all that full law school, the law school experience and its glory that you've gone through will speak for you sometimes when you get off the job market. Now, is it guaranteed? No, not really. Nothing is guaranteed. The whole point is really not about guaranteeing anything, but it's about what gives you more options and more chances. And I hope you can make your decision from there, right? So that is just something to bear in mind. One other thing I would say is a pro of the JD is that, in my opinion, I think it gives you not just more time, but there's something I would like to say is a sort of immigration benefit. You see, my hand is up because it's like, this one, just listen carefully, right? It doesn't give you a green card or give you some sort of stay here, but I'm sure you've heard about the H-1B sponsorship, and very soon I'm going to be doing an interview with someone who actually got sponsorship, and so that they can take us through that process. Anyway, just to let you know that the H-1B visa process is a lottery-based process. In other words, it's not guaranteed, right? But what happens is that if for some reason, let's say your JD program is 3 years, and you're able to intern with this organization after your first year, and this is just a scenario, right? After your first year, and the organization loves you so much, and for some miraculous reason they want to hire you, right? They have multiple years to try the H-1B lottery process. This, in my opinion, is a plus, right? So let's say the first year, or after the first year, you work for them, and then they want to try. Let's say you get denied, or you're not picked in the first year or in the second year. You have another year to try again, right? For me, my opinion, the LLMs don't get that opportunity. Remember, the LLMs don't have a lot of opportunity to intern during their program unless they do some of the things I'm going to be talking about further down the line. But you don't have the opportunity to intern during your program, and so once you jump out of school, you're supposed to find a sponsor, because H-1B applications are filed only in, I think what I remember, please, do your research and you can correct me in the comment section. You make those applications only once a year, and I think that's in April, right? And so something to bear in mind is that you jump off the market as an LLM student into looking for these folks who will sponsor you, and if for some reason they are not able to sponsor you, that's it, your time is up, because it's only once a year, right? But if you're in the JD program, let's say after the first year that doesn't work out, you can try again and even again before your OPT time starts running. So that's, the benefit of a JD program, if I'm being honest with you, really lies in the fact that you have more time. It gives you 3 years, but there are some cons which I'm going to address next. Now, I'm going to be talking about the pros of an LLM, and some of the pros of an LLM are going to be the cons of a JD, right? The first thing I'm going to tell you, which is the cost, right? The cost of an LLM is significantly lower than a JD. The average cost of an LLM is within the 30,000s to 40,000s. This is the average cost. This is just tuition. This is minus, I know there are still some other expenditures, but remember the LLM is usually for 1 year. So for that tuition for 1 year is usually between $30,000 to $40,000. I'm sure it has gone up, but this is at the time I did my research. Please do your research. But for a JD, it is way more higher than that. The average from what my research shows, it is $220,000. And I know folks who it costs higher. I have cousins who are lawyers in the US who it costs significantly higher for. So it's just something that you need to, a part of me is really averse to taking that much debt. Like, it just gives me a migraine, because if you don't have that money, you need to probably borrow it somehow, and just having that much debt for me has always been a concern. But if you can afford it, if you can afford that as a JD, why not, right? Now, another thing that I think is a benefit of the LLM program, and as you know, I went through the LLM program, is that it's a shorter time, right? It is, while the benefit of the JD is in the fact that it's a longer time, the LLM has a benefit in its short time, right? It really depends on what your priority is, right? But one thing I would say is that it's a shorter path to becoming a lawyer in the US, as opposed to folks who go through the 3-year program before they write the bar exam. As an LLM student, after your LLM program, which is 1 year, you can still go ahead to write the exam. And in the market, two of us are lawyers, both the JD lawyer and the LLM lawyer. Anyway, but yeah, there are some differences there, but I'm just saying that to say you have a shorter time. It's a shorter route to becoming a lawyer, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the better route. It really depends on what your priorities are. Another thing I would say is that it's a shorter time to specialize in the US, right? So I'm sure you know that an LLM is a 1-year intense program. So let me give you an example. My master's was in intellectual property, and so all my courses were about me specializing in intellectual property. Within that 1 year, I took courses on copyright, trademark, trade secrets, patents, software licensing, everything that streamlines my career into becoming an IP specialist. And that happened, right? So in my opinion, it's a short time, but it's very critical, right? It's a short time that allows you to specialize and get information relevant to your career, which is different from the JD, in my opinion, because the JD exposes you to different laws here, and your first year, you're practically taking a lot of core classes that you might not necessarily be relevant to your career, in quote, right? Everything I'm putting in quote because it depends on your perspective, right? But an LLM is an intense way to specialize and get information relevant to your career. And I have to be honest, even now, how many years down the line, the things that I learned during my LLM is what is still keeping me, right? So I would never tell you that an LLM is a waste. I went through it. I have a job. I went through all the process. And for me, it is not a waste. But right, it's just important for you to understand that there are some nitty-gritties around these things, right? I would also say about specialization, that something to bear in mind is that it is for a lot of you, right, who are coming to the US from your various countries. A lot of you have already lawyers in your countries. You've already been exposed to all the types of laws that are out there, constitutional law, civil law, and a lot of you are really looking to specialize. That is where the LLM is a stronger point, right? Because if you're tired of school too, like I was after taking the bar exam, and the Nigerian bar exam is, a kettle of, it's a separate thing that needs to be addressed. But after taking that exam, I knew that I did not have the energy to go to 3 years of school. I just couldn't do it. I did not have it in me to do it. So I went generally for the LLM program, right? So that is something that you need to ask yourself, right? Can you go through that 3-year program? If you can, then ask yourself if you can also take care of the cost, right? But the LLM is really a shorter way to specialize. It's a shorter way to become a lawyer in the US. As an international student, there are hurdles you always have to scale. Now, what I'm going to do is just provide, I'm sure you can see that I've highlighted some of the cons of an LLM student, which is that you're running out of time. One thing I would say in addressing the time constraints that I did was that I extended my program, right? But extending your program is not cheap. It would come at a cost, because when I say I extended my program, I stayed in school. Instead of ending it in summer, I stayed till December, and that was because I still took some more classes. It gave me the opportunity to also intern with a nice organization, and that experience helped me, I want to say, jump right into the job market. It helped me, right? So I would say an internship is important, but I'm not going to say, by all means you need to extend your program, but I would say that it gives you more time because the LLM program is just short. Now, another problem that I have mentioned with the LLM program is the shortness of time too makes immigration difficult, because it looks like the moment you arrive the country, you're supposed to figure out immigration, which is very strange. It can be crazy because you're still trying to settle down. You're dealing with culture shock. The culture in me was shocked, right? So it was a lot of transition for me. What I would say, and take it from somebody who was denied H-1B visa, I would say one way to deal with the challenges of the LLM kiniko, and for those who don't know what that means, I mean the LLM shenanigans and immigration, is to not put all your eggs in the basket of H-1B lottery, right? On this channel, I've talked about all your other options. You can look for jobs that give you H-1B cap exemption. You can also try the NIW application, which gives you a pathway to self-petition for your own green card. I mean, you don't need to depend on any employer, but there are some, requirements for you to meet. I've mentioned that I have, a way of you meeting with me if you want to schedule some sort of like consultation, if you want some one-on-one FaceTime for us to talk about my experience with the NIW. But if you don't, please check my videos on NIW application. I feel like that can be very helpful if you think that will help you. I think for LLM students, one other challenge is that we are so narrow-minded. A lot of us feel like it has to be the US or nothing, and I was one of such people. If you are one of such people and you are driven and you feel like this is where God wants you to be, fine. But if you're not, please have an open mind. I once interviewed someone on LinkedIn and he had an open mind, and right now I think he's in the UK with a big law firm. I think Allen and Overy, I can't remember. But I'm going to provide the link to that interview because it was a written interview and he just provided responses. Right? I think that can help you, keeping an open mind. If you watch my interview with Destiny, you see Destiny applied to everywhere outside of the US as well, and I think that can help you. A lot of LLM students struggle with the H1B lottery process because they feel like, oh, it has to be this way. But think about other ways, and that can make the LLM still work for you. So I'm sure you can see that I've weighed the two. The biggest benefit for the JD, just to summarize it all up, is that you have more time. You have more time to work for organizations, to intern, which an LLM does not necessarily give you. You have more time to figure out immigration. You have more time to work for employers. For the LLM, the biggest pro for me is the cost. It is significantly cheaper than a JD, over 100,000 cheaper than a JD, in my opinion, and based on my research and based on me just going through an LLM program, right? And so it is significantly cheaper. It is a shorter route for me to be a lawyer, and while there are challenges, and I do not underestimate the challenges, people are doing it. People have done it, and maybe you can or maybe you can't. That's really up to you. And this is something that is very important, because I feel like if you know this, you are not completely shocked when you arrive there. I wish somebody did this for me. So feel free to, please, if you want to schedule any time with me, please use the link in the Calendly in the description box. I feel like I'm really looking forward to meeting some of you. I'm really looking forward to asking and assisting you in achieving your goals. Thank you so much for this, joining me on this episode. I hope it was helpful to you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.